One of, if not the most frustrating slash challenging thing about tracking is trying to track foods that we haven't made ourselves. So this is basically the procedure that I use and that I recommend for how to track foods that you haven't made. And I've divided these foods basically into two different categories. So the first category of foods, these are the easier ones to track. And these are foods that are from a well-known restaurant that has a lot of different locations. So this would be something like Wendy's. With this category of food, what I recommend doing is going to Google and then typing in, like I said, we're gonna go with Wendy's. We're gonna say I went to Wendy's and I ordered a large chili. So basically what I do is I'll just type in the restaurant name. So I'll put Wendy's, and then I'll put nutrition, and then information. I'll search that, and then from there I will look for the information that's on the company's actual website. So like this one says like Wendy's.com versus like this says like fastfoodnutrition.org or nutritioncharts.com, and I basically only use if it's from the company's actual website. So there, I'll click on that, and that's your menu, and we got a large chili, so fries and sides and chili and large. Cool. And so from there I will look at how many calories it has, 340, and I'll look at how much protein it has, 22. And then from there I will go into MyFitnessPal. I'll go to, let's say I had it for lunch, and I'll type in Wendy's large chili, search. And so, because here's where it gets overwhelming, is like if I don't do that first step and I just jump straight into MyFitnessPal, we get this large variety of, there's a bunch of different things. Like here it says, even just the first two, large chili 340 calories, large chili 250 calories. So that's almost 100 calorie difference. And so if I hadn't gone to Wendy's website first, I would just be guessing. And then there's all kinds of stuff in between there. Now that I've gone to Wendy's website, I'll say it had 340 calories and 22 grams of protein, I believe is what it was. Yeah, 22 grams of protein. So I will just pick the one that has that or is closest to that. So here we go, 340 calories, 22 grams of protein, and good to track it. So that one was pretty easy. If sometimes it's not the first thing on there, or sometimes it's way down there. So if that's the case, just search for it until you find it, or you find something that's really close to it. The other group of foods, these are the ones that are more challenging to track. And these are from like local restaurants that most of the time don't have their nutrition information online or on their menu or in the restaurant. This applies to, you could say, both restaurants, and you could also say this group of food. You could also say this group of food applies to, like, if you were to go over to like a friend's house and they made you a meal and you basically are like, hey, here's the dinner, and you don't have the exact nutrition facts. So that also kind of falls into this category. So, but back into the context of a restaurant. So the first thing you can do is, like, let's say you go to like a local breakfast diner and you get a 3-egg and ham and cheese omelet. What you can do, the first step, is you could go through that same process that I did with Wendy's. You could go to Google the restaurant, and then put nutrition information afterwards, and then see if that company has nutrition information on their website. Most likely they won't, but they might. The other thing you can do is you can, let's say you get that meal and you're like, oh, this looks exactly like the ham and cheese omelet that I get at IHOP. You could go to IHOP nutrition information, Google that, and then just use the information from IHOP to track this omelet that you got at this local breakfast diner. If you can't think of another restaurant that has a similar dish, which is often the case, like a lot of times I can't think of, like if I get something random, I can't always think of another restaurant, like a more mainstream restaurant that has a similar dish. If that's the case, then this is where it gets a little trickier, but it just takes practice and you get better at it over time. So back to the 3-egg and ham and cheese omelet. The first thing I do is I'll look at the meal and I will try to just quickly kind of break down the meal in my head. Like I'll be like, okay, how many eggs do I think that is? How much cheese? How much ham? So for example, I'm looking at the omelet, I'm like, okay, it's probably 3 eggs. That's about 200 calories. That's probably like 2 ounces of cheese. That's another 200 calories. So now I'm at 400 calories. And I'm like, okay, it's got a little bit of ham. I'll add another 50 calories there. That's 450. And then I'll say, okay, it's got some vegetables. So that's another 50s. That's 500. And then I'll say, okay, well, there's obviously like they cooked it with some sort of like butter or oil. I can see it on the plate. I can see it on the omelet. So I'll just add another 200 calories for the oil. So now I'm at 700. And I'll do the same thing with the protein. I'll look at it and be like, okay, 3 eggs, about 20 grams of protein. There's 20. The 2 ounces of cheese, there's another 12-ish. So it's 32. The ham, let's say it gives me another 8. That gets me to 40. And then vegetables gives me a couple more. So let's say it's around 42, 43 grams of protein. So and I'm going to expand on that later for like, you're like, hey, I'm not at that step. Like I can't look at a meal and be able to break it down like that. I'll get to that in a little bit. But right now, now I've kind of estimated, okay, it's got about 700 calories and about 43 grams of protein. From there, I'll literally just go into the MyFitnessPal database and type in 3-egg ham and cheese omelet, and I'll try to find the closest one to like 700 calories and 43 grams of protein. There's a couple different ways you can go about this. If you find something that's close to that, great, you can use that. If you're having trouble finding something, you can, let me just do it. Okay. Yeah, let's just do this. So 3-egg ham and cheese omelet. Well, there's one. It says 679 and 53 grams of protein. That's a little high for what I estimated. Let's see here. Okay, 491. So here might be a good example. So okay, so I estimated 700 calories and I estimated about 43 grams of protein. So what I could do here is just adjust this number of servings to try to get close to what I came up with. So what, 1.2, not enough, 1.4, it's pretty dang close. 0.5. Yeah, boom, use that. So I could just track that. I just adjusted the portion, and in my head I already knew I wanted to be around 700 calories and around 42 grams of protein, and I could just use this entry with this new updated number of servings and track it that way. Let's see what's a good example of this. Okay, this could work as well. So another way I could do this is like, okay, so this one's obviously quite a bit off from what I estimated, so I could just focus on the protein. I said it was about 43. Okay, so now I've fixed the protein, but the calories are now 300 under what I estimated. So what I could do here is I could just track this, knowing that it's 300 calories short, and then to make up for that, I just track an additional 300 calories worth of oil. Like that. So now, at the end of the day, even though I used 2 different entries, the protein is right and the calories are right. So that's another way you can track it. Okay, now with all of that out of the way, if you're like, okay, that's great if you know a lot about food, but I don't know a lot about food. So that's where, once you start, you just do the best you can, and you search it and don't super stress about it, and just pick what you think is accurate. It's probably going to be quite a bit off, but that's okay. Like, you'll get better at it over time. Once you get better, that's when, like, once you learn more about food, that's when you'll be able to do basically what I just did there and come up with a protein estimate and a calorie estimate before you search it, which will help you get a better food listing, a more accurate tracking. That's where, like, when it comes to like tracking, basically we learn different things in different situations. So I think we learn the most about food when we make food ourselves at home. So like if like you make a 3-egg ham and cheese omelet at home, that's when you're gonna learn about how many calories are in eggs or in ham or in cheese, how much oil you used, all that different stuff. That's where you'll be able to learn how much protein is in there. It'll be from what you made at home. And so that's why I think we learn the most when we cook. I think we learn the most and get better at estimating when we practice estimating, which is pretty common sense. So it's like, if all we ever do is make things at home and we never estimate, sometimes it can just feel, sometimes then it gets really frustrating when we have to estimate because we never estimate, and it's just frustrating. So I think they're both super important skills, both knowing a lot about food and being able to accurately estimate. And I think they're learned in different situations. And I think the more we know about food, the more accurately we can estimate. Again, pretty common sense. So like I said, if you're just getting going, don't stress about this and just do the best you can. Just pick one and you'll get better over time. Which leads me to, this can be super stressful. And like, I would say that once you get once you understand food a decent amount, you should be able to come up with an estimate in 5 minutes or less. Like, you shouldn't have to spend more than 5 minutes on this process. And even when you're like a beginner and just getting into this, I would still try to like limit yourself to no more than 10 minutes, just because it can get like really rabbit hole-y, and you could spend a lot of time and frustration trying to be perfect with this estimation when it's impossible, when you're not going to be perfect no matter what. So I would try to put a cap and like do your best to be accurate given what you know about food at the time, and like spend the time to do it right and like give your full focus to this process when you're doing it. But I would try not to go over 10 minutes because it's gonna get really annoying and you're gonna stop. Because I've been there. Like, a lot of times, if I start spending, if it just becomes too much of a burden, if I'm like spending 20 minutes to estimate the calorie content of a meal, that's just ridiculous. So I would say when you get good, 5 minutes at the beginning, maybe 10 minutes, but try not to go more than 10 minutes. Do your best, but don't stress about it. And that leads me to, I get that like when we go out to eat, that who wants to sit and spend the entire meal like calculating the calorie and protein content of a meal? So what I actually do, and what I would recommend, is taking a picture of your food. So here's where I went yesterday. So I wasn't going to spend the whole meal estimating the calorie and protein content of these different foods. So I just took a quick picture of that salad and a quick picture of, we got barbecue, so beef and beans. That way I could just do it when I got home versus having to sit there at the table and like miss out on the food and miss out on the conversation because I spent the whole time trying to estimate the calorie and protein content. So that's what I'd say about that is like, if you're with other people and or even if you're by yourself, and I don't want to mess with this right now while I'm eating, just take some quick pictures and do it. And what I would add with that is I would try to track by the end of the night before you go to sleep, because again, it can just get overwhelming if like you put that thing off and then like 4 days go by and you still haven't tracked the dinner from Sunday nights. It's just at that point, it's like, what's the point? Especially if more have built up over that time. So now Thursday night comes around and you have 6 meals you have to estimate. Like I've been there as well, and I just end up not doing it. So I would say try to do it at night before you go to bed. But if it's a dinner and you're with people, sometimes that's not possible. So that's why I'd say like last resort, no later than the next day before you go to sleep. So basically, if it's not that day, then no later than the next day. And that'll prevent these things from stacking up. And then also limiting yourself to no more than 10 minutes per meal. Once you get better, you should be able to get it under 5 minutes. That's everything. It's just walking those lines. And when it comes to especially the estimating portion, like on one hand, not just like rushing this thing and just picking the first entry that pops up. Ham and cheese omelet, oh, first one looks good, boom, done, even though it might be 400 calories off. It's actually taking the time to do it right, while at the same time, not spending too much time and getting too stressed or too frustrated about something that's not gonna be perfect anyway, and kind of putting that cap on yourself and not letting yourself spend too long on it. If you have any questions about this process, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section below and I'll do my best to get back to it.